Whether it's in the air, on land, the sea, or under it, the SimNet is your simulation network. Hello and welcome back to the SimNet, your one-stop shop for all things simulation. In the footage to follow, I will be disassembling and then reassembling the F-15 joystick grip that is on sale now. If you'd like more videos like this, consider subscribing. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers. Let's get into it, but first, a quick word from our sponsor, PCB Way. I discovered PCB Way while searching for an online vendor who could help manufacture these super slick 5-way PCBs designed by iMarkMedes on Reddit. While I was on their site, I discovered that they do even more than just PCBs, including 3D printing services, CNC machining, and assembly as well. So if you don't have access to a 3D printer, PCB Way offers that service. I was a customer before they ever reached out to me, so I'm happy to partner with them for my next few videos. Hello and welcome back to the SimNet. Today we are going to be assembling the F-15E Strike Eagle controller, or F-15C Eagle controller. Really, any F-15 after the F-15A and B featured this grip. Now, the earliest versions of the F-15 actually featured the B8 grip, which is available for free on Thingiverse. But today, we're taking a look at this one. And before we assemble this grip, I'm actually going to disassemble this grip. I think that's probably the best way to show how it is constructed. And for that, I am going to need a couple of tools. We've got a drill, our screwdriver, a flexible head here, a flat head, the M3 screw, and then an Allen key with a ball head, and then of course pliers just in case anything isn't cooperating particularly. So to start, let's see, yeah, that should be okay. This is going to be a bit more of an ad hoc video. I'm not going to not very produced. Just going to go through it the way that I would do it regularly. And we're going to start actually with the switch caps. So these are press fit, although I do like to put in a dab of hot glue or CA glue if I'm finalizing a build. So those pop right off. This particular version uses the 5 ways from Adafruit. You can also get them at AliExpress for cheaper, but I like Adafruit has really good ship times. So got those off. Again, a little bit of glue. These were printed in resin by PCB Way, and really happy with the work that they did. In fact, it's so good that there are no layer lines, and there's actually no there are no layer lines, but you can see lines from my 3D model because I modeled these in Blender. So that's very interesting. You can actually see the shape of the mesh. That's how good the resin print is. I don't think I would do the whole grip in resin because resin can be a little bit more brittle, although I've never tried. So maybe that could be something to try in the future. These pieces are also press fit as well. Actually, we can start there. I will. Yeah, let's unscrew this cap here. The front button and thumb button have flat heads, although that's not entirely necessary. You could do that with M3 screws, or really any screw of your liking. But that's nice because it holds. I'll angle this here so you can see what I'm doing. That holds the thumb and pinky buttons in place. Let's just get this one out here. Then we should be able to pop the rocker base right out. So as mentioned, these rockers are this 5-way switch is the what I'll call traditional style. It's the type that I came up with for the B8 grip, and what this features is 2 pieces of filament that slide in, and they keep this 5-way switch in place. So it's a 5-way. There you go. Keeps that in place, and that connects to the PCB in there. Same with these ones. They are press fit, although it looks like, yeah, it did put a bit of glue here. Turn my light back on here. So this is also a 5-way, again connects in that way, and then finally the trim hat base switch here should just pop right out like so. And I think I had some glue there too. Yes. Okay. Right. And if I did want to perform any sort of service or anything on these, I would then just pop the pieces of filament out, and then the entire switch should fall out. And this filament trick is quite handy because, you know, if you're 3D printing things, you will very frequently have pieces of filament just laying around from old builds or old spools. So it's helpful. So you can see how through those holes, and then pops right off. The way that this is done is these letters are actually raised a little bit, about 2 millimeters, and then painted on top with a white acrylic or a paint anywhere pen. Those are very handy. So that's how those 5-ways come together. Now the 5-ways for the Alps switches are slightly different. I'll show those here. So for these Alps switches, these are slightly different. Again, they are press fit to get into the stick itself, but on the bottom you'll see they're slightly different. Similar philosophy, that slots in. This one was a prototype, it's just a little bit small, but it slots in like that, and then you just put 2 M2 screws straight into the holes. It holds it in place very nicely, and then the cap fits on top. And it's press fit as well, although you can use glue. That's kind of the name of the game here. Alrighty, so got these, and then the push buttons are also press fit. That's the nice thing about these plastics, is that they fit together quite nicely. So that's it right there. And then to assemble and disassemble that red cap comes off. Can hold that in place, and then unscrew this so that nut fits in there. It's got a hexagonal shape. It's very similar, although not identical, to the one by Ray Ryder Left Stick. I really liked his design, but it just didn't fit perfectly for mine. And the reason is because I wanted to ensure that my design was compatible with the auto P1 switches. So these are the mil-spec switches with the nice travel, much heavier 5, 10, 15 pound spring forces. A little bit heavier than the DIY version, although I will say that this switch does an excellent job of recreating that for much less than the $30 price tag on the auto switches. I think that screw can kind of stay in there. This one is a little bit tighter, so I'll just pull that baby out. And same kind of thing, just unscrew and pull. There we go. You can see how that nut fits in there. These guys away, and then that slides right through. Okay, the trigger, very simple. We've got a piece of filament here. It sticks out just a little bit, although you can sand that down. I like to leave it sticking out just a little bit, so I can do that. Trigger pops right out. Again, the spring lines up with the indentation in the back. and then likewise you can line those up. Although I do have a version now which has a hole in the top of the trigger for a torsion spring. The torsion springs can be a little bit harder to find than just a standard 5mm outer diameter spring, but this one's actually 1 centimeter, 0.8, 0.9. Really, as long as it's not thicker than the trigger housing itself, it should be okay. So that we can get that out once we get the top off here. Okay, so let's see if I can actually get these out as well while we're at it. Can be a little bit finicky as it is a tight fit. Might actually be better just to leave that one in there. Okay. From here, assembly is pretty straightforward. I mean, or rather disassembly. We've got 4 screws. These are 20 or 16mm in length, and they screw through this plate into this rounder housing here. Since we popped that off, we'll take a look. Yeah, these are the 20 mil. Okay. 2. Three and 4. Okay, now the last piece in removing this faceplate is actually this piece of filament here. So that slides through and slots into a hole, and that keeps the bottom in place. In my first design I didn't have the filament, and I just found that there's a little bit of side-to-side motion in this plate which I didn't like. I run these grips on a force feedback base, specifically the VP Force Rhino, and I'm a huge fan of it. It does an excellent job. However, you don't want any wiggle in the stick if you're running a force feedback base, so I'm just going to keep pulling at this one here. There we go. Remove that piece of filament, and now this plate comes right off. And you can see where we have the holes that the original screws kind of come into. Hope this focus is okay here. Zoom out just a little bit. Okay, so now we can see how there's room for the wires. The width of the stick is thicker than the B8 grip. There are no walls that are less than 2mm thick. That was some of the feedback that I got in the B8 grip build. So I was pulling here, but there's also a piece of filament here which keeps the bottom of the trigger module in place. This one might be a little bit harder to pull out. Cut it quite close. But we've got our handy tweezers, which should help us pick this one out here. If not, that's okay. We can always get rid of it once we open up the top here. Okay, that seems pretty stuck in there.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and if it ain't working, break it. There we go. We can always stick another piece of filament in there. That's one of the benefits. You can just pull harder than you ever would with a trigger pull, that's for sure. Okay, so on the inside here, we have the remaining 2 shell pieces on the sides and then the top. And the top is connected with 4 screws. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can get these out with our drill as well. We may need a swivel head for this one. Having the Allen key with the ball head is really helpful here as well. Let's see if we can get these ones out. Yeah, we might have to hand remove these ones. That's okay. They were installed by hand, so back to basics here with the Allen key with the ball head. The ball head allows you to unscrew at an angle, so it maintains constant pressure on the sides. So it takes a little bit longer, but actually not too bad. Now in this version, again, this was a prototype grip. I screwed the M3 screws straight into the plastic. However, for your own build, I would recommend M3 brass inserts. There is enough room. You have to be quite precise with the insertion of the inserts. Is that a pun? Well, because you don't want to melt through the sides, but there's enough room. On one of the later versions of this grip, I was able to get some inserts in there, and they hold. Although I haven't had any problems drilling straight into the plastic, for longevity purposes, it might be worth it. Okay, so now we've got the grip with the top removed. Again, so the way that worked was we've got 4 holes, and then those 4, these look like 10 and 3 by 10, although I think you can go up to 16. There's enough room in there. Okay, now we're going to remove these 3 screws. Go. Actually, these are 16s, not 3s, or not 10s. Okay, so now with a little bit of pulling, we should be able to get these apart. The nice thing is they slot together so well because of this metal connector that we have in here right now. A little bit of elbow grease and we should be able to get it. button back here. Okay. There we go. All right. So there we have the PCB, and the nice thing about this design is that the PCB mounts on the inside. I didn't really have any problems with rattling in the B8 grip, but with this one you can kind of guarantee it. Now I have these flatheads, you could use an M3, I just happen to have these laying around and I thought the aesthetic was nice. This connector is 3D printed in metal, in aluminum by PCB Way. I really like it. I think that it's probably unnecessary to have the nut in aluminum as well, even if you're connecting to a metal base. I've been using a 3D printed nut on a Virpil base for the better part of 2 years, and I haven't had to replace it, and I've had it on the Max springs with an extension. And I also use a 3D printed nut for my VP Force Rhino, actually, right now. However, if I'm using one of my extensions, like a 3D printed extension, I do like to use the metal connector at the base instead of the plastic one, as the forces can snap the plastic. Now, that's like at the most extreme end, but it's possible. So if I were to, for example, put this on a Rhino and crank it up to the max, and then run it without an extension, I would probably use the metal. If I was using an extension, I would run plastic. It would be a-okay. So there are very few circumstances and very few like if you're using a Warthog base or a Gunfighter, you won't have any issues with the plastic one. And it also depends on your PLA filament and your infill. So I run 20% infill, and I've had one snap ever on the plastic one. The rest are a-okay. And the nice thing about this connector too is that it is shaped and is similar dimensions to the Thrustmaster connection. So if you're running a Thrustmaster base and you have an old Thrustmaster Warthog, let's say it's no longer working and you want to run a metal connector in here, but you don't want to purchase a 3D printed one in metal, then you can go ahead and use your old one. Or Double Estes has a Shapeways shop in which they have a number of Thrustmaster and old Cougar style products that all use this kind of connector, and the nut that he has on his store is smaller than this one and therefore less expensive. So if you're looking for a cheaper metal 3D printed Thrustmaster style connector, I would recommend Double Estes Shapeways store. You can access that, or you can just Google that. The link to his PCBs, which is what's in here, is in the bill of materials, so that you can get the spelling from the name. I'll put it in the description as well. I'll put the Shapeways shop in the description. That's probably easiest. But yeah, the nice thing about it is that it's nice and secure, absolutely zero wiggle, and I've been using this extensively with no problems. So let's get this off too, just to see how that works. All right, and then that pops right out, slots through very nicely, and comes apart just like so. This is beefier than the Thrustmaster one. That's why I say similar. And then this is the inside of the aluminum connector. If you scratch it, it gets shiny. Okay, and then on this side here, this is really the first step. So once you've completed the PCB, and if you want a rundown on how to do that, the B8 grip video does a great job. The only difference between this PCB and the B8 PCB is that it's slightly longer. So this is the shift register 24, so it has 3 CD4021 shift registers, whereas the B8 grip only uses 2, and that's because there are more inputs on this grip than the B8 grip, and so you just need the extra inputs that the extra shift register provides. And that's really all there is to it. It comes together quite easily. I probably went over length on the wires, but ended up, just folding things in. There's still room on the side, so these 2 to 5 millimeter thick walls mean that there's enough room for the wires in here, whereas on this side I tried to keep it a little bit more solid. And what I noticed as well is, again, I print with a 15 to 20% infill because I'm prototyping all the time, so I don't want to use as much filament. And then I end up using those grips because I've made them. But when I ordered from PCBWay, they printed these with 100% infill, and they were actually quite weighty in my hand. Like, I had PETG, nylon, resin, and they were all heavier than my PLA. So that was quite nice. Even the PLA one was quite good at 100% infill. So if you're doing this project for yourself and this is a grip that you're going to have for a while, I'd recommend 100% infill. It's worth the filament, and the feel is quite nice. It doesn't sound hollow like the lower infill one does. And then assembly is just everything in reverse. And the last thing I'll show is, before I do that, it's just an example. So this PCB, it's the double Estes PCB, so same one. Pulled as design from Osh Park, but I had it assembled by PCBWay, so you can see all the components here, and that's pretty good. I'm happy with the job that they did. The soldering is very nice. It's nicer than what I can do because they're professionals and I'm a hobbyist. The one call out with these switches, so obviously we've got the iMarchimedes PCBs on here. Now these were designed for their throttle, called the Wilson Thrust, which is an awesome piece of kit. It's leather wrapped. Talk about class, that's amazing. I feel like I need a cigar or something just to use it, but it's an excellent piece of kit. And they together with some folks on the forums figured out how to solve in hardware the problem with these Alps switches. So as some of you may know, when you select a position on these Alps switches, the click that you feel is actually the depression of the switch. So click and depress always activates no matter which direction you're hitting. If you push, it's depressed, forward, left, right, back, etc. You always activate the push when selecting a direction. So what does that mean? If you're in DCS, for example, and you're selecting, and you're mapping your controls, you'll do trim hat down, and what it will say in DCS is you have selected trim hat push and trim hat down. Trim hat up is trim hat push and trim hat up, etc. That's without the PCB. Now with the PCB, what happens is you select trim hat down and it just shows button 28 or whatever, like trim hat down, trim hat up, and then push is push. So it effectively takes this really nice premium feeling switch and using a hardware solution gives it the same functionality as this 5-way from Adafruit. And the difference really is just the feel. Like, this feels nice, it does. This feels nicer. How much nicer? 10%, 20%, 50%, I don't know. But it is a little bit stiffer, and especially when we're talking about pieces that are sitting up high, and you are rocking them from a higher leverage point, it feels very easy to activate these switches because they just don't have as much resistance as these ones. So for something like the F-15 grip, I think that this is the way to go. For the B8 grip, I think these ones are actually a-okay because the trim hat sits so low on this switch that it effectively feels like you're activating it at the base, and it feels quite nice. I'd say even comparable. But this one is just a little bit more premium, but hey, you need to get this hardware solution and it costs a little bit more. Granted, that's only necessary if you are using this PCB. If you are using MMJoy or like an Arduino project, you can solve the Alps switch problem in software. However, you can only do it for up to 2 of the switches in MMJoy. Whereas this solution, you get this one with the SMD components, all the resistors and stuff, and now you can theoretically attach as many of these switches as you want. The last call out for these Alps switches, if you're doing this, is that you need to connect and stick a pin in the VCC, and that's from the input side. So when you're plugging this into your VP Force Rhino, your Virpil, or your Thrustmaster base, this brown wire goes to VCC. You need to essentially tap VCC to go to each of these three PCBs, because they do require power in order to operate. Whereas traditionally with the 5-ways, there's no VCC required. It's just ground and inputs like a tact switch or any other regular switch. So it is one extra step. It's a little bit different than the other assembly methods in the past, but it works, which is the most exciting thing. It was like a eureka moment. I think in the future, later on down the line, either I or somebody else will design a PCB where the VCC goes throughout, so you can just connect things and power them as needed. But for now, this absolutely does the trick for 1/5 of the cost of a Virpil grip. So it's a good solution. Okay, maybe half or less, unless you're at scale. So Alps switches, they feel better. They're a little bit more complicated. These 5-ways, they feel great. They feel better than most 5-ways that I've ever used before. So I can recommend them. I think they work great with this grip, but if you really want to go for that like Virpil switch type feeling, these ones are really good. And then Wing and Thrustmaster, they use a series of tact switches. So that's possible too. However, my only issue with tact switches and 3D printing is that it's very hard to get consistent tolerances. So that's why I stayed away from them. I used to print the J-Flyer tact switch 5-ways, and those were great when they worked. However, with my printer and the tolerances that I was working with, there was always one button that was mushy, one that wasn't activating, and then also with my clumsy soldering skills, I always ended up melting the plastic housing, just trying to get everything connected. So I moved away from that. I went to these 5-ways, and now with iMarchimedes PCB, we can actually finally use these Alps. And the cool thing too is that I've updated the B8 grip files so that they use these Alps 5-ways as well, or rather the files for the housings for the B8 grip are on Thingiverse on the regular page. Last thing, and then we'll put this all back together, is these buttons, caps, switches, etc. These are free, they're open source, they're Creative Commons or whatever it is with attribution or what have you, and you can feel free to download these and modify to your heart's content. You don't need to buy the F-15 grip to get the F-15 stuff. It's only the grip shell, like these main components, that I've put up for sale. Now, the whole kit is in the Cults page and will be on Things as well, but the buttons only are on Thingiverse. They are free, and the reason being is I didn't design this PCB. I didn't design this switch, so I don't feel comfortable charging for it. So it's all free. And then even this, you can get this design from my B8 grip, so why lock it behind a paywall? This way, if you like these switches and you want to leverage them for your own projects, there's an awesome F-14 throttle in the works right now that I saw recently. A subscriber, I pinned it on the F-15 video, so if you check the top comment or the pinned comment in my last video, you'll see their project, and they have built a replica F-14 throttle. The thing looks amazing with all the levers, with everything. And then I was watching their video and they mentioned that they use the same filament through hole to keep switch in place method, and I highly recommend that method because it's a time saver. You don't need to purchase any additional screws, and everything fits very snugly. Okay, all right. we're here, we made it. Now we have to put everything back together. I will actually show. That this works quite well with the 3D printed nut as well. We don't necessarily need the metal one. The metal one is nice for the visuals. It just looks nice, but you don't really need it. The connector, yeah, okay, maybe I would recommend that. Okay, there we go, and pitter patter. Let's get at her. It did take a little bit of finagling to get everything lined up, but that happens too when using power tools. Mind yourself. Okay. Close this one up. Make sure we're not pinching any wires here. Okay. Very nice. If you want to know how to assemble the PCBs, I would recommend watching the assembly video for the B8 grip. That covers it in great detail. Again, the only difference being that in the B8 grip there's fewer inputs, so it's a slightly smaller PCB, but just repeat the steps and should be good to go that way. Okay, there we go. And I like the, I thought that I would mind the gap. I thought that I would notice the gap when using the stick. I don't at all. I can't tell the difference between this and the B8 grip. The fact that there's this tiny gap, it's imperceptible. I have thought about releasing a version where everything is one piece. However, then I run into the issue of not necessarily having the ability to take it apart and troubleshoot if there's something that needs a little bit of fixing or what have you. These resin printed pieces are spectacular. Like, you can hit the button from any angle, and because there's no layer lines, you always get button activation. It's really nice. If you have a resin printer, I would recommend printing the buttons and the button caps in resin. I don't have one, but PCBWay printed these, as I've mentioned a few times. Okay, that's press fit. Fits very snug. Feels really good. It's just great travel on these buttons. I searched far and wide and have to thank my wife for always humoring me when I would ask her, how does this feel? Click this. Does that feel good? And after a while, it was... really good to finally find one that worked. By the way, if you like these long format videos where I do the task and talk about it and how it happened, please do let me know in the comments, because I'd be happy to do more of this. I'm never sure if people really want to hear me talk about it at length, but if you do, let me know and I'll do it. Okay, there we go. That should be in place there. We will need another piece of filament because I snapped the last one. Red this time because why not? So I'm just going to try and line up the holes here. Okay, that looks about right. Oh, a little high. There we go. So that just slides right through, and there's a corresponding hole on the other side. It can take a little bit of finagling, but eventually all roads lead to Rome. Okay, there we go. I'm going to cut it and just leave just a little bit out in case I need to pull it out again. So that's the trigger module in place. I'm not going to put it under tension. I'm not going to put the spring in just yet. I'll do that last. And the nice thing too with this trigger module is that it's compatible with the previous version that used tacked switches. So if you don't like the longer travel of the microswitch version, then you can always replace it with the old one. That's all available through the Universal Flight Sim trigger module design there. Okay. Now I may have done this slightly out of order with the assembly here, but let's give it a shot. Yeah, that's not right. Okay. Do this one by hand. Once the first one's in, it's a lot easier to do the rest. So I'm just screwing these in to their corresponding spots, and they fit quite snug. And I went with 4 instead of 2 just because there's a little bit less of a side load. You're going side to side, you don't want to feel the anything flexing or moving, otherwise it really breaks the immersion, I find. And by no means is PLA the only filament. These could be printed in a variety. I had PCB Away do PETG and nylon. I think PLA looks the best, and you can certainly print in resin. I mean, it just depends on how much time you have and how many resources you're willing to spend, because technically resin might look the best because there are so few layer lines, but if you have a really tuned in printer, that could do the trick too. I will put the trigger in now because I can see what's going on. I'm going to fit that in. What did we have? We had red for the last one too. Okay. Okay. So what I like to do is get this about yay far, and then get the spring and trigger in there. What I'm doing here is I'm just waiting for the click. Okay. That's lined up. Oops. Go. Okay. Try this again. Might take a few tries, that's okay. There we go. And we are through. And we got stage 1, stage 2, stage 1, stage 2. That springy hollow sound tends to go away after a few actuations. Okay. Let's get screws 3 and 4 set here. Screwing straight in the plastic. If you're assembling it for the first time, that's totally fine. I haven't disassembled and reassembled having screwed straight into the plastic too many times, so I can't speak to the longevity. I would recommend threaded inserts, but it's, I guess in this case, it's really personal preference. I haven't had any problems, but food for thought, for sure. These wires are actually all former DuPont cables that I snipped and stripped, but you can use DuPont. I'm trying to learn PCB design, because ideally I'd like to fit these switches onto a PCB that then has like a JST connector, and then JST connectors on the boards as well. And that way the only custom part of the assembly process that you, the assembler, would have to do would be to create JST wires that are the right length. And even then, I think you could get a third party to do that. I mean, in my ideal world, everybody that downloads one of these grips would be able to order a completed unit from a third-party service like PCBWay. So that'd be pretty cool, because then the only limit would be what their material, what switches and materials they have on hand. Which, to be fair, is like they have a lot. They have, and even still, sometimes you can provide your own. So let's get that in there. That's good, that keeps that in place. And we're going to now screw in these 20 mil. So I like to hold things tight and take it for a ride here. There we go. That's nice. One is pretty much all you need for structural strength, and the rest are pretty good for visual. They don't actually keep the press fit pieces in place, but there we go. First time around, I usually torque these by hand. Reason being, it's a little less likely to over torque, but for the purposes of this video and not going over an hour, this is the way to go. Okay, last one. Alright, we are in there. This gap here only exists because I didn't level my printer bed before starting this print, so I had to put it on a raft, and it led to a little bit of a gap. But if you really tighten these screws down, that eliminates the gap, and also if these parts are printed correctly, it's completely flush. So it's nice. There's no side to side. There's no flex. Like if you have your palm here and your fingers here and you push, you don't feel any back and forth motion. And then likewise, when you're pushing with your thumb, let's say you're rolling right, there's no side to side play here. That's really nice, because the first version didn't have any sort of reinforcement here, and so it would slide in and out. But this version does. So that's really nice. Okay. Last couple of steps here, and then we are good to go, folks. I'm going to put that one in, and then put these pieces of filament in place. There we go. And if they are ever too long, just go ahead and snip them. Okay. Just that into place. place. There we go. Same with this one. They're all labeled. Oops. Oh boy. Gotta line up the holes with the empty side here, otherwise I tend to knock into the soldered connections, which we don't want. Soldered? How do you say it? Leave a comment below if you made it this far. Okay. Almost set. These are just a little longer, so I must have pulled them from the wrong side, but that's okay. So just snip these to size, and then same deal. Okay, press into place. Castle switch, these will be a little bit loose now because I haven't used any glue, but that's okay. Same deal here. Press into place. There we go. Second to last. Nice. And then finally, last but not least. There we go. Haha. All right, and make it nice and pretty here for the final reveal. There you have it, folks. The completed F-15 grip, now with the plastic connector. I find that it is a little stiff when twisting. However, that's on purpose. That prevents any wobble. So I like that it's a little bit more stiff. With the metal one, metal on metal, it will be even stiffer, but if you rub them a bit before installing them into the grip, that will eliminate that problem. Or you could sand down the connector just a little bit, but I think the metal to plastic is the best. It forms a good connection. I've never had these threads snapped, even in PLA. It does a pretty good job because it threads on nicely. And there you have it. We have our dual stage, our very nice push buttons, and then our 5-ways here. Again, if you want to run the Alps 5-way, just remember to connect the VCC to the first VCC coming into the board. And then besides that, we are good to go. So if you like this kind of video, again, please do leave a comment below saying so. And if you haven't subscribed and you're watching this video, please consider subscribing. There's a lot more on the way. And if you have any suggestions for what to make next, do let me know as well. And finally, getting through the laundry list here, follow me on social. I've got pretty much every platform out there. Got the Twitter running and the Instagram as well, where I do like to post some behind the scenes content. So again, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Till we meet again.
Thank you for tuning into the SimNet, your one-stop shop for all things simulation. Till we meet again.